Hello and welcome to Controversial Topic. This is episode 5, and I am dealing with the onslaught that is Overwatch. Overwatch is a very dynamic, personality-driven, character-based shooter. Lots of online multiplayer, lots of variation, I guess you can say, in settings. There's a lot of stylized kind of texturing going on within the title. A lot of homages towards other team shooters, specifically Team Fortress 2, with the allowing for spraying tags on multitudes of surfaces, etc. I won't be showing any promotional material for the title, however. It is very, very strongly promoted video game, and I'm sure that its information is very simple to find. However, information concerning some marketing that took place, there were some metal boxes with looks like some kind of CNC'd steel plate or a piece of aluminum with a drink in it with customized names for individuals. And that in itself looked like a form of promotion because that didn't seem to be something that was open to the public. So that looked like it was an invitation-only dealio. Looked very interesting. It was a big metal box that looked exactly like the loot crates in their game. And within it was a bottle of cola because it is sponsored. There's some sponsorship going on there for the competitive play by Coca-Cola. And a drinking cup inside with 2 t-shirts, some lithographs, and a copy of the title which contains some skins that would otherwise are, essentially being charged. People are being charged $20 for that content. So aside from the superficial content, what is there to the game? Well, unfortunately, not a whole lot, because it unfortunately suffers from the same thing that other well-tuned video games suffer from. The mechanics are so well-tuned that it's almost like driving a car or riding a bicycle. There's some kind of muscle memory kind of thing going on there. There's a lot of audio-visual feedback that reinforces that kind of conditioning. And it's effective. It's very effective. There's a lot of physics going on. I would consider saying that the characters are physics reactive. There's a lot of kind of fluid motion in hair. There's a lot of dynamics and certain pieces of cloth on certain characters. However, it doesn't look like there's a whole lot in way of damage. It doesn't look like there's a whole lot in the way of decals or decals in terms of that, the art direction, etc. So for me, it unfortunately seems very flat. The gameplay experience is something that you can get from almost any shooter in its class. Loadout, I believe, is a name for one, which has very similar kind of art style, actually, in a lot of ways. Cartoony humanoid guys and women. You can dress them up, they look silly, there's a lot of multitude of customizable weapons, etc. But that's not what my focus is when I play video games. With Loadout, the focus is the components for the weaponry. It's grinding to get those weapons. For Warframe, it's the social experience. I'm finding anyway, I find it's more of a community-driven game. And on that side of things, I would have really enjoyed getting more involved. However, my interest in Warframe is somewhat diminished. For purely superficial reasons, I have a great deal of respect for what that video game has become over time because of what it has been built into and what it is continuing to be put into it, and that's very exciting. So I'm very, I guess, thankful for Warframe having been such a prominent thing for people to look at as an example for free to play. However, Overwatch doesn't apply to that, and Loadout, I believe, is also a free to play title, and so again, Overwatch doesn't apply to that. So what are you paying for if the mechanics are tight and there's no complaints there? What is necessitated out of playing then? What player progression is there? Well, it's a bunch of superficial content, and unfortunately that superficial content is kind of held out in front of people as a carrot on a string, and it essentially comes down to this pie graph, the only graphic that I've had up for the entirety of this video. This pie graph demonstrates the frequency of gradients in frequency of, or frequency of gradients. It's the gradients of frequency and the gradients of frequency. That sounds like a great band name. It's the gradients of frequency. Anyway, so yeah, you get epics, you get the rares, you get the commons, you get the uncommons, whatever. So it's content that is kind of bloat, that is kind of dogpiled or stacked on top of content that, of course, players would want if they want to differentiate how they look on the frenetic battlefields of Overwatch. However, the frenetic battlefields of Overwatch are kind of trite, and I don't see it sticking around. I don't see it actually being the big, persistent hit. That just doesn't seem to be the case with video games. This is, I believe, a big, flashbang kind of thing going off. And when everyone's done being dazed and the concussive effects have kind of worn off, I don't think it's going to have much staying power, because unfortunately it's a very high production value, well-tuned video game, and all that's going to take to make other people play different things is another well-produced, audio-visual feedback title. That's basically it. I mean, you don't have a whole lot of toying around with ragdoll physics. There's some interactability in the environments. There's a couple of different means of being tactical and etc. But for the most part, if I were to actually demonstrate the mechanics of what playing Overwatch looks like, at least how I interpret it, this pie graph is half of my interpretation. This pie graph is like, this is what gets everyone going. It's that 2.43% little sliver that you get. That's the piece of pie you're getting. It's that fucking super sweet looking customizable thing that you can slap onto your character for a little bit of individualism and differentiation. And for me, that's just, it's bleak. It's bleak and it's superficial. And when you have a game that rewards with bleak, superficial content, then I believe that you have a video game then that is just simply bleak, superficial content. And if that's the beautiful stallion that this thing is riding on, or if this is the big, beautiful stallion that Blizzard is trying to sell you, I mean, hey, I don't know. You want to hop on that horse for $60? You're jumping on a game that is essentially going to be rewarding you with superficial stuff. So, I don't know. I mean, I'd probably much rather play Dark Souls 3, whatever. I'd probably much rather play The Witcher 3. I would probably much rather play Hawken in terms of the combat, because, I mean, there's two characters in Overwatch. Like, I haven't played a second of Overwatch, but I already feel like I've beaten it. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like I've beaten the meta of I know what I would want my characters to look like and sound like, and the idea of playing that title to attain those things is just so silly, because I, as an individual, am not necessarily attaining anything. Whereas in The Witcher, you can quest out, and you get to play the game, and you get to experience the story, and it's this hugely rewarding, fundamentals, gameplay scenario that is somewhat unique and derived from the way that you attempt the mission or the tasks at hand. Whereas Overwatch is pretty rigid in that it's basically push for the point, shoot the pew pew, push for the point. So it's not there for me. It's just not there for me. I mean, Hawken delivers on that in a way where you're essentially a fleet of attuned machines that are supposed to be rigid and mechanical, whereas you get, I guess, semblances of that with using Reinhardt's shield and some of the other defensive mechanics, Bastion turning into a turret, all those kinds of things. Those kind of slow down moments where you kind of like hunker down to do the thing. And there's just too many games that kind of deliver in this way. There's too many MOBAs that deliver PvE action, which is just missing, which is very strange that Overwatch would be missing it. Battleborn has it in spades, which is really strange. Battleborn, I think, is possibly everything that some people who were disappointed with Overwatch were looking for. Well, they can find it over there. And Blizzard has the time to essentially work in, all of the outrage and everything else as if it's them listening to people, when really it's this void that individuals and the public are screaming into. I mean, with Zara or Zayara or whatever that character, the large burly woman with the heavy weapon, would she have been released had there not been outrage concerning the body dysphoria that Blizzard was allegedly propagating accidentally because of art direction, whatever's. I mean, come on. I don't know. It's hard to say if they're listening. It's hard to say if there's any actual care going into it. Obviously, there's a lot of hard work going into it. There's a lot of attention and precision in certain details. And that amount of polish that they have going can be sustained, and they can drip feed, more content, whatever. It's already technically an ascribed success. But I don't believe that it is duly so. I believe that it is a simple, superficial representation of content that is only monopolizing on the market and not necessarily monopolizing on its own merits. I don't think that the title is as fully realized as it could be. Blizzard could probably whip up a PvE map a la Riverbend MOBA style kind of Dota 2-ness relatively quickly. I mean, I made my own Warcraft 3 total conversion years ago, and instead of using the currency systems, I decided that I was going to make it so that you have to energies and imps and stuff from things, and then you have to combine them. And that was very simple. And for Blizzard to have those games that they had worked on, that's their thing. what League was based off of was something that they had created, essentially. It's their frameworks. And the scale of the company and just the amount of talent that they have at their disposal, like it's amazing, incredible, and kind of inflammatory. But that's where I'm at with it. I beat Overwatch because I made this pie chart. There's a couple of really nice examples of data floating around. Someone aggregated a couple of different unboxings. Unfortunately, I don't have that information, and I'm not going to post it here. But this pie chart is a copy and paste of the percentage totals from the unboxings, which ranged from 235 plus boxes, per user to the global average is above 100. It's pretty much globally over 110. And the 110 to about, looks like 234, is a range from about 4 epics to 12 epics, and I believe the peak was 14 for a 285. So it's kind of all over the place, but I believe this pie chart kind of surmises that whole thing. So this is it. This is Overwatch. This is the loot box thing. What tags do you want? What do you want your characters to look like? It's a shopping list scenario. Like, you want to buy the title for $40 and then grind out that content? Okay, so then your characters look like that. Then what? At least with Hawken, you can grind out certain customizations and different weapons and whatever else, and that changes up gameplay. In this situation, you don't have that because it's a character-based shooter, so these characters stay their characters, and the player simply pays their money in time, There's no economics of it. I was trying to initially find the economics of it, and I did find after some time that the epic skins and most of the content cost about 1,000 of the in-game currency, and that's earned after a couple of hours, maybe 6 or 7 hours or something. You might have over 1,000. You might have a stack of loot boxes after you're level 15 or something if you don't open them. And that's something else. You may or may not have a higher chance of epics and rares if you let your loot boxes stack. There's no confirmation of that, but as I said, you're pretty much looking at 4 epics for a stack of 110, and anything over 10 for 100 or 230 and up. So the differentials there is really an exponential folding of about 2.6% for every 100. Something like that. Because, so you open 100 loot boxes. All right, so your chances of getting epics, it's about 2.5% out of 100. You're looking at maybe 5 or 6 after the 100. And if you want to fold and continue opening boxes and you open another 100 more, well, for whatever reason, it looks like your chances of rolling might increase anywhere between 2.6 and about 3.4. But rough numbers, just a random sample. As people upload these aggregated loot box and videos, it's kind of a little bit more elucidating. But I think this is pretty adequate. So this is where I'm going to leave the video. It's only a controversial topic because it's just a game. It's just a game, people. Beatles were just a band, and Overwatch is just a game. Chill out, yo. So I wanted to find out some explanation for probabilities / chances for this data set. And the data not being so diversified, we're looking at we're looking at a gradient of 4 different things. So we're looking at essentially a D4. If you've never seen a 4-sided dice, it is it's a 4-sided pyramid. And each number has its own corner. And when that corner faces up, and this dice can only ever face up, that is what you pick. So essentially, for the number 1, you have 4, 3, and 2 on the bottom. For 2, you have 1, 3, and 4. For 3, you have 2, 4, and 1. And for 4, you have 3, 2, and 1. A petty pusher mechanic would basically make it so that if there's a gradient, or if there's like a means of differentiating by 4, or by any number, I suppose, because dice would be a good example, because you can have an exponential amount of sides to a dice. So yes, anyway, a D4 in this case would be the most probable, and basically after 100 throws of the dice, it is expected that the 4 would become lighter with every throw that it does not land on. And so the pity pusher mechanic would basically enforce so that with every 50 throws, you're guaranteed another epic within the next 50 throws. So if you roll 2 stacks of 50, or if you roll 50 D4s, and you end up with 2 epics, you're still going to be guaranteed possibly another 2 epics in the next 100 throws. And that kind of accounts for, I guess you could say, the number of outcomes versus the number of throws. A D4 that is perfectly weighted should always land on one of its 4 sides, 1/4 of the time. Like with any dice, it should be an equal probability if it is an equally centered dice. But in this case, the outcomes can be, I guess, reinforced. So the 4 become lighter, and the other numbers would become heavier, and etc. So you'd end up with this kind of balancing act system, which is kind of like you're not simply rolling a dice. You're throwing a dice to the table, but then the dice is kind of rolling on the sides that are closest to the table, and it can possibly, topple over or whatever. And I would suppose that after 115 or so rolls of the dice, if you only have X amount of rares versus uncommons, it might have a means of possibly making it so that you end up with more rares. Or maybe it has a mechanic that kind of computationally understands how many pieces of content a player uses the currency to purchase versus what they seem to enjoy most or preview and equip most out of loot boxes. However, my argument does stand that there is decent content that is essentially full of set dressing and kind of tacked down, and yeah, I believe it's just a means of controlling the active player base, and I guess having some superficial grindiness to it, because without it, that mechanic, I don't believe that really anyone would continue playing after the first 15 days. But hey, whatever, what's my opinion, right? What's opinions? What's my opinion, right? What's opinions? What's my opinion, right? What's opinions? What's my opinion, right? What's opinions?